In this video, I will analyze this article with you. We'll take a look in terms of use of language and communicative strategies, what we can say about this article on the Telegraph website. It's called Shakespeare While Never Be Bored with a Bard. Let's take a look at the task, and this is composed like the task you could be given in the Abitur. It reads like this: analyze the way the author tries to convince the reader of his view, focus on communicative strategies and use of language. I always use color to mark this to help myself focus and concentrate later on. Here, the first thing I would check is what are we supposed to analyze. Now, it's about the way the author tries to convince the reader of his view. For this article, this is very broad. The whole article is basically argumentative and tries to convince us, so we can look at the whole article, and there's nothing we should really leave out. We're looking at communicative strategies and use of language. Now, of course, you have to know, what does that mean? What could I possibly find for use of language and communicative strategies? I have made a video about both of them, use of language and communicative strategies, but let me give you an overview of what to check for right here. Let's take a quick look at what you're looking for when you're analyzing for use of language. Again, I have a video on this. Here's the link. But basically, you're looking for these four fields: imagery, choice of words, tone, forms of repetition, and just any kind of other device that is related closely to language. Then we have analyzing communicative strategies, and these are the four fields of things you should be looking for: any kind of support the author gives to what he writes, any kind of address to the reader, could also be a question, any kind of content that is structured in an interesting way, or does the author use tone and register in an interesting way. There's an overlap, so some things could be classified as either communicative strategies or a specific use of language, and here it doesn't really matter. They use the one that you think fits better. In an exam situation, you would have read the text first, and then in a first task you would have written a summary, and this would be your second task. First, I would reread the text and mark these 2 points that you're focusing on. Focusing on communicative strategies, I will mark them in yellow, and use of language, I will mark that in green, of course. So this is what the text looks like after I have marked it, and I use green for use of language and yellow for communicative strategies. So this is what it looks like now, and of course with pen I mark what exactly I mean by what I have marked there. Let's start with use of language. The first thing I have found is an alliteration that is in the title, and this is repeated later on in the text: bored with the bard. It is an alliteration because even though there's with the in between it, the choice would have been between bored with Shakespeare and bored with a bard. And this bored and bard is a clear alliteration to me. Here it's interesting that it's not an argument that the author makes, but it's rather a counter argument, or an argument that he wants to counter with his own arguments, an argument that he wants to refute, that students will be bored with the bard. Furthermore, down here what we have is use of language in the sense that he uses very positive terms to describe Shakespeare. Wonderful world, his 10 stories, memorable scenes, his larger-than-life characters, so clearly to portray what is good about Shakespeare. Down here we have the sentence: education ministers come, education ministers go, Shakespeare's truths endure. So it's a parallel sentence structure where it's always subject and verb, and this is repeated 3 times. The first 2 are very similar, the last one is a little bit different, and it clearly stresses this idea of Shakespeare is timeless, even though education ministers might think differently about him. Down here, I have marked something for communicative strategies as well as language. From a language perspective, I would say that the description moody rap stars and dumbing down, that's misguided and patronizing, is a very subjective choice of language. So that is clearly subjective, that a modern adaptation of the play where Romeo or Macbeth are apparently dressed in modern ways, that they are presented as moody, and that is dumbing down. Very subjective, but very effective, of course. We have the same idea again further down here, where the author says trendy versions where all the characters are wearing hoodies is subjective and even making fun of it a little bit. On the next page, we have the term brilliant. Again, this ties into the first description of Shakespeare as positive, wonderful world, 10 stories, memorable scenes. And here this goes along with a positive description, that this production of the play was brilliant down here. Let us now focus on communicative strategies. As I said, the title includes this alliteration, and we have several points where the author tries to make counter-arguments to the claim that students will become bored with the bard. And here the first counter-argument he makes is that he thinks people have suffered from studying far too little Shakespeare, so that the opposite is true, that more Shakespeare is needed for students. Further down here, he says the new curriculum rightly insists and so forth. Here, he's using this curriculum to support his own opinion. He's making clear that his opinion is the same as that of the education ministry, and this curriculum supports what he thinks. His language becomes provocative down here, as I said, when I talked about language, when he describes these modern adaptations as having moody rap star characters, or that this is dumbing down. So it's clearly provoking people who might think the opposite, who might think these adaptations help young students understand. Another counter-argument or another argument is refuted down here, that Shakespeare is difficult. He refutes this by saying that it's up to the pupil and the teacher to try harder to understand Shakespeare. That's not enough to say Shakespeare is difficult. He tries to engage the reader using a rhetorical question. What further inspiration do you need to pick up the play? So a clear rhetorical question. Down here, he gives personal examples, and more are to follow later on in the last part of the article. So when he shows teenagers Shakespeare plays, their most frequent reaction is, "It makes the play come alive, sir." So this proves that he has personal experience with teaching Shakespeare and with the reactions that students will have to experiencing a Shakespeare play. Similar point comes here later on, that he saw a very good sixth form production at a previous school that students put on. And the last personal example, also very effective, where he says, one of my proudest moments in teaching when he was given a bottle of wine and the message said, "Thank you for helping me to learn to like Shakespeare." Very effective use of this anecdote. It's just one personal example, but it really sticks with the reader. And then you take these individual points and arrange them in an intelligent and effective way, so not to repeat yourself. Lots of students often wonder, should I go chronologically, so from the top to the bottom through the text? When writing, this doesn't necessarily make sense. The best idea is to summarize points, and the best idea is to start with one of these two aspects. Start with, for example, communicative strategies, note down the 2-3 most important points, do the same for use of language. And no, you don't have to list everything you have found, only those things that are interesting and that are really effective when you read the text. You will of course find this article on the homepage of the Telegraph, but you have to have an account to log in. So I will put the text of this article into the video description below, so please check that. Also down there I will put some paragraphs where I show how I would compose paragraphs to analyze the aspects that I've talked about here. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. All the best and good luck for your exams. See you soon. Goodbye.
English with Mr. B.